What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of the Believe in Bucs podcast. My name is Jonathan Shields, as we are now into the heart of the offseason. Mandatory minicamp is over. It's been an eventful offseason for the Bucs, to say the very least, and we're here to break down everything that happened in mandatory minicamp. A little update on the Baker Mayfield contract. I don't know if you can call it a saga yet, but situation, I think, is fair to say. And then we did this last year. I thought it was interesting because it's changed, and I'm going to be ranking the Bucs position groups from weakest to strongest in terms of what position group I think is the most talented and where I think the Bucs might have some holes, to say the least. And when going through this, the Bucs had less holes than I thought going through, and it's just a credit to the job that Jason Light and company did this offseason too, where a lot of people might think, because of the big names that were lost, from Mike Evans to Levante David, and some franchise icons, that the Bucs might take a step back. And I actually think the Bucs are in pretty good position to take a step forward with the additions that they've made. But let's start with mandatory minicamp. Now, obviously, it's been done for a little bit now, but one of the bigger takeaways that I saw is that Chris Godwin's been having a really good camp, which is incredibly important for the Bucs. Obviously, with Mike Evans leaving, but Chris Godwin 2 years ago was that guy before he got hurt. I mean, people might be like, when I say this, going to be like, no way. Chris Godwin was a first-team All-Pro before he got hurt. He was leading the league in receiving yards, and he was Baker Mayfield's go-to guy. Now, after he had the ACL, that first year back was ramping up process, and then he was incredible the next year. And I think this might be a similar situation. So any fantasy football guys out there, I would target Chris Godwin. I think he's going to have a huge year for the Bucs, and he is looking very good so far during the mandatory minicamp. And now I believe the Bucs announced that July 27th is the first day of camp. It might be a little bit earlier, but anyway, late July. And, he just has a year now, a full year removed of being healthy, having a healthy offseason. And the last time we saw Chris Godwin with a healthy offseason, again, he was a terror for the first 9 weeks before, that Ravens game. And another stuff that I'm going to be looking at very closely, and this might be kind of foreshadowing to the position group rankings we're going to be doing later, is the Bucs secondary. I think that's a huge, huge kind of question mark, because Todd Bowles even came out and said we had to play Antoine Winfield in center field last year, which kind of takes away some of the stuff that he's really good at and impacting the game. That's because in the secondary, the Bucs just weren't where they needed to be talent-wise, and maybe even experience-wise. Now with Jacob Parrish taking another step, and Jacob Parrish taking another step, and then Benjamin Morrison is the biggest X factor in all of this for the Bucs, because if he takes that step, people forget when Benjamin Morrison was drafted, this was a first-round caliber talent when he was drafted, and it was kind of surprising the Bucs kind of targeted him, because the Bucs historically has not really targeted guys that have a big injury history like that. But with how good the Bucs have been drafting, specifically in non-first round picks in terms of finding starters, it's going to be key for them. That is not key. It is a good sign that they draft him, because that means they believe in what the medical said and whatnot. So this is it's a big year for him. And I honestly would go with Zion McCollum and Benjamin Morrison on the outside, and then still have Jacob Parrish in that nickel role. And then you can have Scott, the rookie they drafted out of Miami, kind of filter in when needed. And then all of a sudden you're looking at a group that's pretty good. Now, what's the depth like after that? Stronger than it was maybe 2 years ago, but still not where I would like it to be. So going into training camp, that's going to be one of the biggest things I'm looking at. That and linebacker. Spoiler, those are my two weakest positions kind of going forward. When we do the position rankings later. I love what they did bringing Alex Anzalone. Obviously, you got Trotter coming in as well. But again, Trotter, he's a rookie. How much can you expect from a rookie? Anzalone's been good for a long time, but even in the last 2 or 3 years, he's been nicked up a little bit. What's that depth like afterward? I think it's much better than what it was last year. But kind of going forward, the Bucs really need that depth to be in a spot where you're like, wow, if we lose 1 or 2 guys here, because history says that Anzalone, the last 2 years, he's been banged up a little bit, and then you never know what you're getting out of Trotter, because again, he is a rookie. Even though, like I said when we had Bucky Brooks on, the Bucs had their pick at a majority of the inside linebackers there, and they chose to go with Trotter, which to me says a lot. And it shows that they're confident in them. If the Bucs are confident in them, that I am too. But again, I don't love placing kind of all this pressure on a rookie like that. But when you look at who else the Bucs have in terms of and the linebacker department, you have Servache Dennis, who obviously started last year, and I actually think he's going to be in a better role in that kind of third linebacker spot. So those are kind of storylines to look forward to going into the into training camp. And then obviously you have everything going on with Baker Mayfield, and Baker was at his camp the other day in Oklahoma, and the camp he puts on every year, and he came out and said both parties want to be there. Like, Baker wants to be a Buck, the Bucs want Baker to be a Buck. It's just finding that middle ground where everyone's happy. And I've gone on here and said before, I would not pay Baker a cent more than $50 million. And you even say $50 million, I mean, that's an absurd amount. I'm not even totally comfortable paying him more than $45 million, if I'm being honest. Kind of the Seahawks showed how to really win in this kind of year. And it's surrounding your non-top 5 quarterback with every kind of piece you need. And if Baker just takes a little bit less, which I think he would, I mean, look, he deserves a raise from what he was making. But, once you get into that range of, in the 50s, it just really, really, really prohibits you. So now, like we talked about, you can't have both Antoine Field and Tyke Smith and Zion McCollum and 2 edge rushers and Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey and Ibuka McMillan and Godwin when their contracts are up, and 2 tackles and a guard that they've paid. So I don't know. When you give out that kind of money, I think it has to be for a generational type quarterback. And you see the squeezes that teams have to make when they pay that money to a non-generational quarterback. And those teams outside of the Jaguars last year, that's because Liam Cohen might be the next great coach. It really prohibits you. And some of the Jaguars contracts really haven't even come up yet. And look, with the cap you can restructure and do whatever, but eventually that money is due. And I would rather have 2 tackles, 2 really good safeties, a good center, 2 really good receivers, 2 corners, 2 edge rushers, right? And it's just tough to do that if you're paying your quarterback $55 million. So I wonder what that middle ground is going to be. It's dangerous if this goes into the season. One of 2 things: one, for Baker, if he doesn't play well, if he gets hurt or something, and 2, for the Bucs, if Baker somehow has a career, not somehow, I really hope Baker has a career. If Baker has a career year, now you have to pay him $55 million. So it's one of the more interesting storylines in all the NFL this season because of just the variance with it. Like, I can see both. I can see Baker finishing top 5 in MVP voting, and I can see Baker falling off a cliff and getting hurt midway through the year, and the Bucs having to completely pivot at quarterback. But if the Bucs don't re-sign Baker, they owe him $20 million next year anyway, because of the way that the cap is formulated. So I think a deal is going to get done. I just don't know what that number is going to be. And again, I would be pretty sketch if that number starts with a 5, especially if there's another number next to that 5. I wouldn't go a cent more than 50. I think Baker would take 50, but I mean, we're talking about an absurd amount of money once you get in that range. But going forward with the Bucs as well. So now let's get into our position rankings. We've broken down Baker's contract. I've been pretty steadfast in my thoughts for him, and I think where that's going to be. But he gave the deadline before training camp, so we'll see what ends up there. But position rankings, we did this last year. I had the wide receiver core first last year, so the position rankings that I have are the corner. I separated corners and safeties this year. Last year was just secondary. This year I separated corners and safeties. You have linebackers, you have your defensive line, offensive line, wide receivers, running back, and obviously quarterback. So I already foreshadowed a little bit, but in last I do have the cornerbacks, just because Zion McCollum really struggled to end last year. He was hurt for the first time in his career, and when he wasn't hurt after he got that new contract, he just did not look the same. He needs a huge bounce back this year, in my opinion, to warrant that contract, because the Bucs paid him before training camp, which I kind of questioned at the time, but he had a good year last year. Without Jamel Dean, he needs to be that guy. And then who starts opposite of him? Parrish struggled last year when he was outside at corner. I'm not saying he's going to struggle his whole career. He might be great there, but he's great at nickel. I'm really looking at Benjamin Morrison to take that spot. Secondly, we're going to stay on defense, and we're going to go to the linebacking core. We've already talked about both of these before, and this one has the most potential to be a top 4 group by the end of the year because of how the confidence that I have in them. But when you look at this group and you're thinking, okay, there's too many question marks for me right now to go and put them where maybe they might be at the end of the year. How's Anzalone fit in the scheme? He's a little bit older. Does he still have it? What do you get out of Trotter, the rookie? Servache Dennis, what does he add? This one I think has them in the corners too. Both kind of have high upside to get into the top 4 of this group kind of moving forward. So this next spot, I think there's like tiers, right? I think those two, and then you get in this next spot. Like I think the Bucs safeties are really strong. I think the Bucs edge rushers really took a step up in terms of quality that they have. And you look at the offense, it's like, well, if they're healthy, I really like the offensive line. The wide receivers, I'm still kind of high on. I'm going to put running back here. I don't feel good about it because I'm concerned with Bucky Irvin. If Bucky's 100% healthy, him and Kenneth Gainwell are going to make a heck of a duo and they'll be higher. But I'm putting him here because he just really hasn't practiced yet. And the fact that he's still hurt from an injury 6 months ago, Bucky really took a step back last year because of the injuries. And if he's not where he was his rookie year, then this is a spot for them. If you're going to re-rank the positions, running back would probably be in this spot this year. So I don't feel great about it. But, when I look at the safeties, I'm like, Ren, I really like Antoine Winfield and I really like Tyke Smith. And then when I look at the front 7, I really like the new edge rushers they brought in. So I don't know. These are all very close together, these next 3, and I think they're pretty interchangeable. Next, I do have the Bucs defensive line. Now, the Vita Vea situation is interesting. We haven't really talked about it on here because I think it's going to get resolved. He had a hold in. He wants a raise, maybe a new deal. I would pay Vita Vea. I think he's the best run defender in the NFL. And then what the Bucs did to bolster their edge room. Now, we had the same conversation last year. I was as high as anyone on Hassan Reddick, and I've probably never been more wrong in my life about a signing, because my one bold prediction was the Bucs should have 2 double-digit sack guys. The Bucs couldn't even get one guy to 9, I think. And then Kalijah Kancey is the X factor in this. If Kalijah Kancey is for a full season what he's been, then this is a top 2 group in my opinion. But again, you can't bank on that because of where he's been injury-wise in years past. Next up, I am going to go to safety. With Antoine Winfield and Tyke Smith, I think it's one of the more underrated duos in the entire NFL. Tyke Smith, for a stretch last year, is the Bucs defender, the best Bucs defender I think they had. He was making splash plays every year, everywhere. But I do think he kind of took a step back toward the end of the year. He got benched by Todd Bowles for part of a game. So if both those guys are right, and with the new additions to the front 7, if Antoine Winfield can play more free, I think that safety group is really going to take a step up. Next is where I'm going to put the wide receiver, or I'm going to put quarterback next with Baker and Jake Browning. Again, if Baker's 100% healthy, I think that he's a top 7 quarterback, and then we already talked about his contract enough. But next, number 2, I'm going to put the wide receivers. Now, a lot of people might be questioning why I still have them so high. It's because I am drinking the Kool-Aid on Chris Godwin this year, and I am extremely high on I almost said McMillan. Some guys just kind of look different out there. When I saw McMillan come back for the last parts of the year, he's one of those guys that just kind of looked different out there. And you throw in Ibuka a full offseason at the start he got off to last year. Those are 3 guys you're really confident in. And then you throw in Ted Hurst, you throw in Tez Johnson. This one might be the most controversial, but I'm still very optimistic about this Bucs receiver core. And the number 1, I have the Bucs offensive line. People forget how good this offensive line was when they were healthy last year. I think the Bucs have the best tackle in football in Tristan Wirfs. I think Luke Gedeke is about as underrated as it gets on the offensive line. Graham Barton is a big question mark here. I think he bounces back. You have a healthy season of Cody Malk. You have a healthy season of Ben Bredesen. Yes, Liam Cohen was a big reason why the run game was so good 2 years ago. But this offensive line was also a huge reason why that run game was humming, because they stayed healthy the whole year. Last year, they're about as unhealthy as any group. If this group is healthy, it's a top 5 unit in the NFL. Simple as that. Now, $1 million question. Can they stay healthy? History says they're due to be healthy. Everyone except for Graham Barton was hurt for a point last year. So I think they are kind of due to be healthy this year. So in reverse order, I have the Bucs offense line as the strength of this team. Then I have a wide receiver. Then I have quarterback. Then I have the safeties. Then I have edge, running back, linebacker, cornerback. Again, I think those second group right there with running back, safety, defensive line are interchangeable. I mean, if you have defensive line 3rd to last and running back 4th, I could even agree with that at some point. But I do think this Bucs offensive line is an absolute unit, and I think that if the Bucs are going to have success this year, a lot of it's going to have to do with them and their ability to get back to running the ball. And if Bucky Irving's 100% healthy, which we have not seen yet this year, I think that the Bucs running back could be even a top 2 unit. So again, we'll see. The Bucs don't have one position group that's just so much better than the rest. Maybe like they did last year with wide receiver, maybe with Mike Evans and stuff. But I think all these guys are extremely close to each other, and I think that's part of the reason why the more you look at this Bucs roster, the more like, wow, like they really have pieces here every year, everywhere. And cornerback and linebacker are the 2 biggest question marks. And if they get above average play, and they get a few guys to take a step, I think you're really starting to look at what could be, 11, 12 win team. But again, their schedule's tough. It's workable because they don't have to go on the road back-to-back games. But, I think this Bucs team, training camp, this is one of the more interesting training camps because there are going to be battles everywhere. Who's going to be the second corner? Who's going to be the nickel corner? Who's going to be the linebackers? What's their linebacker rotation going to look like? How does that wide receiver core look? The Bucs have a ton of joint practices that will break down once they happen, but it's going to be key to get those guys work and get where the Bucs really need to be, which is contending to win the division and winning multiple playoff games, which talent-wise says they can. The coaching staff has really held them back, talent-wise, defensively, especially on the defense line, has held them back. I think they've addressed a lot of those issues. And if Jason Licht and the Glazers are as confident as Todd Bowles as they seem to be, that they could be in line for a big year. So we're going to wrap it there. I appreciate everyone listening. Make sure you guys download the episode, rate it 5 stars. And we'll be back next week to break down more of the Bucs offseason as we get into the heart of this offseason. So I appreciate everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.